The Post-Tarab Soundscape, underground electronic dance music culture, and the Arab-Canadian diaspora is a creative response to public discourse of Arabness. I used the concept post-Tarab to theorize a shifting performativity of Arabness. Post-Tarab frames the modulation from Arabic classical music genre Tarab to EDM in parallel with the pivot from expected heteronormative Arabness to queer Arabness. Musically, Post-Tarab refers to EDM tracks featuring samples of traditional, folk, and older popular Arabic music, but it also refers to EDM produced by Arab musicians who do not make the track sound Arab. I argue that the Arabness of Arab people is being redefined, and as such, the Arabness of Arabic music is also being redefined.
I'm just more and more I'm coming more back to the roots of when I started DJing, back to the deep tech house and all that, which but if I find a cool track that's oriental, I'll still play it, but
yeah, for sure,
I'm not really focusing on that, even for productions. I'm trying to go my certain style, but I don't really sample much, aside from just I don't know, aside from just air, or I sampled in Egypt a lot, but I was sampling people in the street,
yeah,
and stuff like that.
In Sarah Pink's Doing Sensory Ethnography, she suggests that art installations are the most effective research creation output because of the way they interconnect the senses. Although it is not possible to immerse you all today into my project in the way that I had imagined, I complement Pink's argument to the best of my ability through this audio-visual performance. For the next 30 minutes, I will outline the major conceptual points of my dissertation while mixing the tracks of my interlocutors and focusing on the ethnography that informs my theoretical framework through the use of recorded quotes from interviews. In this, you will hear the voices of my interlocutors, Anas, Mohammed, and Fuad. The images you will see are a mixture of my own personal video and photographic footage from the field, advertisements for events over the years created by my interlocutors, and a visual show of mosques and geometric tiles compiled by my interlocutor, Ibrahim. This visual show is typical of what might be projected onto a screen behind a DJ while they're performing at an EDM event, and is considered to be a psychedelic reclaiming of what might be perceived as Orientalist imagery. This audio-visual performance exemplifies my intensive and engaged, community-based, collaborative, and participant observation methods, where from 2016 to 2020, I've walked with my interlocutors through their everyday lives, as well as taken the role of an artist researcher to help curate and perform in underground EDM events. Arabic music infused into EDM is post-Tarab, a concept that encompasses experiences, genres, temporalities, and philosophies of transcendence. Post-Tarab, in the manner I've defined it, works as a provisional theoretical lens to discuss the temporal continuum of what it means to be Arab in the contemporary post-colonial era. Post-Tarab EDM incorporates classical Tarab elements such as direct samples from old Arabic songs, samples of electronically produced Middle Eastern instruments, and the musical structure of Tarab, which translates into English as ecstasy, enchantment, or musical rapture, and is a genre that features hour-long sets, repetition, improvisation, and detemporalization. Tarab refers to the musical genre, its affectual ecstatic experience, or the cultural setting that combines the two. There are many parallels between EDM and Tarab structurally, as the DJ's musical set is comprised of the same techniques as Tarab. The set is at least an hour in length, features repetitive or looping melodic and percussive elements, and incorporates detemporalization by suspending the bass and adding euphoric improvisatory sounds. Another parallel is the concept of the home base, where the music features national characteristics. Like Chicago house, Detroit techno, Berlin techno, and various other musical hubs, Tarab is also categorized into city hubs like Beirut, Damascus, Al-Andalus, and Cairo. An Arab DJ in Montreal producing Berlin techno with samples from Beirut Tarab creates a sonic diaspora. An EDM track with each of these national elements reflects multiple locales. The placement of elements from one musical locale alongside another evokes a tekustemological understanding of the world, a sonic knowing through technological reproductions and travels of music. It is because of these parallels that I chose Post-Tarab EDM to be a sonic field location for my research along with the cities of Toronto and Montreal in order to show the way that both sound and people travel between home and diaspora. Toronto and Montreal are the diasporic homes of my interlocutors, and the approaches to immigration in each city results in different Arab diaspora communities, which is of key interest to this project in answering the question, what does it mean to be Arab? Each of my interlocutors perform their Arabness differently. They, however, remain categorized as Arab, which presents issues regarding how Arab-identified people, along with their music, are misinterpolated in Canada. I argue that this reductive Orientalist misinterpolation of Arab people is not inclusive of those connected to EDM. My queer and cosmopolitan interlocutors disrupt this Orientalist reduction simply by showing up to parties and sounding their presence. When used as an identifier of either ethnicity or musical sound, Arabness is being rewritten through my interlocutors' performances of self and musical productions.
I'll say I'm Egyptian I never really say I'm Arab, but
Yeah.
I say I'm Egyptian. It's just because that's what my whole family says, but
Interesting.
I don't really I don't really identify myself as much, it's the only time this comes up is when somebody asks me like where you're from, like I'm Egyptian, it's it doesn't really go further than that, but I don't know.
No,
Since I'm half also, it's like I'm not I don't really try to like enforce it on people. I don't try to show off that I'm like Egyptian or Arab, so that topic really rarely comes, And then when I'm in Egypt, like people say Egyptian over Arab. Nobody really says Arab over there.
Okay.
Well, they do, but like not. You hear more Egyptian.
My research outlines the post-Tarab phenomenological experiences of Arabness in underground EDM culture, which hosts spaces filled with affectual politics, moments of becoming, hope, despair, nostalgia, and gives people a place to belong. I've written each chapter to orchestrate these different affectual experiences using Arabic music terminology as a form of analogy that informs my social analysis. Underground EDM is inherently queer as it was introduced by Black queer DJs in Detroit after being rejected from the white gay clubbing world. My interlocutors are, therefore, part of this queer collective. They are not necessarily each individually queer in the way that it is thought of colloquially, but their lifestyles disrupt heteronormative living, incorporate fun and play, and non-normative ways of being in the world, being in relationships, and experiencing life. As Arab individuals, they are expected to move and behave in particular ways that adhere to orthodoxy or radicalism, according to mainstream media narratives. To quote my interlocutor, Muhammad, "This music is my jihad against Orthodox Islam."
I don't like the people that, not that I don't like them, just everyone has their own thing, but people that push it in your face, like, oh, I'm an Arab, like, oh, it's okay, like, fuck, like, it's okay. Okay, you're an Arab, prove that you're a nice, smart person, or you have value. This is what puts you in front, like, this is what puts you as an Arab in front. Then you can say I'm an Arab. after like winning an award or something, not just by like saying it. And I think that's our problem.
I don't know. I feel like I'm not really like labeled as an Arab Egyptian, so maybe this is why I don't see it.
Yeah.
But although like my name on Facebook is Hussein, so like people I guess could figure it out. But I don't know. Nothing really racist ever happened to me.
Because my work is about diaspora, one of the main topics of both theoretical exploration and on-the-ground discussion has been about home. My interlocutors each have different stories about home, whether home be their birthplace or a place of heritage. Depending on where their home is, some travel there often, some cannot go back due to political unrest, some choose not to return, and some have never even been. This relationship directly informs expressions of self and musical performance and production.
But yet it was still beautiful in its own like Baghdad is a beautiful city in general. It's a very like old city, like it has a lot of like nice places. There's a river going in the middle. There's always, you can like chill at places where you look at the water, and it's a nice place. It's almost like what do you call it? It's like a big farmland that moved and became a city. Like there's always trees and stuff like that. So it's very, very memorable like that. Like food. Mm-hmm. Oh my god, the best food, like seriously. Because Iraq is one of the countries where people are a bit overweight too because of that. Like people are very passionate. It's like a mix of Turkish, Persian, and the Middle Eastern food. So it's like
the best mix.
Yeah. Usually when you're in the middle of countries, usually their food is good because you have basically a mix of everything. So that's my memory of it.
In the same way that a musical orchestra has particular placement on a stage, and in the same way that a musical composition has a particular structure according to genre, I use the Arabic music term sayir to outline the underground EDM spaces of Montreal and Toronto. I theorize this using Michel Foucault's concept of heterotopia and Henri Lefebvre's production of space. As sound is also a location for my work, I use R. Murray Schafer's notion of soundscapes and the works of scholars such as Stephen Feld, Ryan Thomas Skinner, and Brandon LaBelle as a foundation for describing the flow of cities and their sonic networks. This framework carved space for me to write about the hum of city movement, the transferal of EDM from headphones to car speakers to living room parties to nightclubs and warehouses, and to describe the spread of sound through heavy bass that rattles through sternums and seeps through walls onto streets, disturbing the quiet of the night. After establishing the underground, I then used Bruno Latour's actor network theory to reflexively integrate my interlocutors into the maps of Toronto and Montreal and show how these spaces and people flow as a whole. I do this by walking the reader in and out of an event using field notes that describe how I felt and what I saw at certain points of events, how I had to grapple with being a professional researcher in EDM, and how once I eventually let go of this inner barrier of my own, I was able to enter the civility of the EDM space. I write about how I approached events, danced, felt like I belonged, and then exited into the wild of society where my interlocutors worked mundane jobs, filed immigration paperwork, and were racialized by authorities. Civility and wild are terms I borrow from Ryan Thomas Skinner, and I apply them in opposite manner of how EDM is normatively perceived. For outsiders, society is civil and EDM culture is wild. For anyone situated as an EDM enthusiast, parties are civil spaces where people can finally be themselves for a moment and explore and experiment with their identities. It is society outside the walls of the event that is wild. EDM spaces are emplacements where people can make home for themselves and for each other in diaspora. When the sounds of home are infused into the DJ set and the room is filled with images and decor that remind people of home, this evokes memories and triggers the nostalgic process. Memories of home can be good or bad, but my interlocutors navigate through them as they improvise through life.
And ever since then, like, holy shit, I went in 2005, and I was supposed to stay there for like a month and something. I stayed like 20 days and I left. It was so bad. It was like curfew at 10 p.m. Right. There was at that time, like, the American soldiers were there. They were fucked. The Iraqi army was there in the streets and they were fucked. The police are corrupt. There's a lot of everything, you know? So ever since then, it's more like sadness. It's like something where, to be honest with you, I gave up on it in a way. Something you kind of like give up on the say dream of like, okay, you're gonna go back home one day and it's amazing. Yeah. That's kind of like, I'm over that. A lot of Iraqis are over that already. It's not gonna happen. And a lot of Arabic countries are in a similar situation. But in the same time, does that reflect a different type of love? Of course. Because now you want to kind of like rebel against that, like fix that in a way, you know, fix the image, fix like...
world of Arabic music, the word taqsim refers to the act of musical improvisation, and it is also an improvisatory genre of music. In the EDM space, participants have the opportunity to improvise with their own bodies, letting movement overtake them even as they are bound by the limitations of their bodies. Musically, this can be understood as the structure of EDM, freestyling or playing live with different musical patterns that are developed in and chosen from the catalog or library of the mind and body. I apply this experience to the concept of improvising the self, where people improvise with their multifaceted identities in the civil EDM space. But EDM is not only a civil, beautiful experience where one freely improvises and explores their sense of self and personal politics. Like a DJ presses the loop button to repeat a phrase over and over again, people often feel stuck in indeterminate states of negativity produced by the cyclical qualities of nightlife. Participants in the EDM lifestyle often find themselves stuck in the vacuum created by frequently playing late-night hours. The higher pay earned by playing these time slots places participants into a positive feedback loop, which then leads them to believe that they cannot refuse such opportunities as they continue to arise. Because of the mental exhaustion created by keeping late-night hours, coupled with the fact that many participants dance the boundary between substance use and abuse to maintain the lifestyle, my interlocutors' stories allow me to illustrate the dissonance that EDM can cause in one's life. I also point out how life outside of EDM, in the wild society, has a similar cyclical vibe of work and obligations, and how the wild life of society, the corporate world, for example, is the expectation that my interlocutors are trying to break free from.
And that's the real beauty. That's why I want to also get away from the whole corporate world. It just doesn't fit who I am. And it's hard for me as an Arab who grew up tied to and really I value my culture and stuff, but I also am a very modern Arab, African and Muslim that had the chance to go and to try to explain to my family, to my parents. They're open-minded, they're both doctors, they travel, they speak a few languages, but there remains that box of the Moroccan society and the social class they're in to have that success model.
I frame this social dissonance in musical terminology, cadence or qaflat, and modulation or ghammas, to describe the way that participants variably exit and return to the scene, often as part of an ostensible resolution for their discomfort. Over the course of my fieldwork, I've watched people modulate in and out of the scene. I've watched people leave for good, and I've watched people die. Leaving does not necessarily resolve problems, but instead can trigger a process of speculation and future making that allows people to see the order and chaos again, They can see the greater picture of the community, art, connection, and movement. Re-entering as an event organizer, they continuously try to make EDM safer, more inclusive, and they try to keep out cultural appropriation, bad drugs, and predators.
You can find anything on Moroccan street.
My dissertation expands on performance ethnography methodologies by pushing the boundaries of reflexivity, carving space for researchers to write not only about how they're perceived, received, and positioned in the community they're working in, but also to write about their own intimate thoughts and experiences, both good and bad, anxious and confident. Ethnographically, it opens up questions about the importance of nightlife for minority groups and how Arab-identified people experience migration to and life in diaspora. Theoretically, now that I've set the stage for Post-Tarab EDM, I've started to look at my work more closely through the lens of nationalism and Pan-Arabism. How, for example, my North African or Maghrebi interlocutors did not connect with the Arabness prescribed to them. Although I touched on this in my dissertation, I plan to expand upon the soundscapes I explored less, such as language performance and conversations had about Arab people by non-Arabs, to paint a clearer picture of who is present, who fits, and why. My dissertation argues that sonic field sites are locations where people gather and that sound is an element that can be followed from home to diaspora and back and forth and back and forth. I've outlined the new shapes that Arabic music is taking alongside EDM and what that means for a particular group of Arab people living in Toronto and Montreal. Using EDM as a sonic location, I outline the sounds present, the spaces they occur in, the communities involved, and the moments of affect, trance, and tarab experienced. I've begun to situate myself among a group of scholars who are writing about music and migration, music as cultural diplomacy, and about nightlife as an important space for social cohesion. EDM is often viewed as a marginalized, unimportant space where people are partying and engaging in hedonistic, unrealistic moments together. My work and my interlocutors suggest otherwise. EDM is a burgeoning field, a worldwide phenomenon that is gaining more traction and creating new subgenres regularly. Underground EDM is a field where it is acceptable to be honest and vulnerable about life experiences, memories, nostalgia, and identity exploration and improvisation. Underground EDM is the revolution against heteronormative living. The COVID-19 pandemic and the socio-political landscape in which the pandemic is situated is forcing scholars to conduct research differently and people to play music differently. Due to current research restrictions, ethnographic moments that resemble the research I conducted are not currently possible to encounter. But EDM continues to be part of the current conversation regardless of the occurrence of parties. My interlocutors continue to make music and explore their environments for new sounds and inspiration while they wait. I want to share with the committee and the audience one final ethnographic moment between myself and my interlocutor, Saadi, as the final cadence of this performance. Saadi was caught in a techno loop, facing criminal charges, and even ended up hospitalized after one of our meetings. Like the fleeting nature of the online world that I mention in my conceptualization of EDM spaces, Saadi is nowhere to be found in any of my networks. I hope that he is simply modulated out of the Toronto scene, but it brings me pain to say that I don't know whether or not he is alive. My dissertation explores the limitations of the mind and body in EDM, and it is dedicated to anyone who has pushed these limits. Saadi left our first meeting with an anecdote. He told me about the time he had randomly gone to a beach in Casablanca and sat on the sand meditating for a few hours before he stood up and continued walking. He walked out to the pier and stood at the end, watching the waves breaking and crashing into the rocks over and over again. He looked out and said to himself, "This is techno." The way the waves crash and are continuously different but always giving the same motion, the way that when you add just a slight difference to your loop, it changes the whole mood and could even create a remix. The good techno, Gigi, it is art. I went to Casablanca shortly after meeting him for the first time. I make a point now to go out to the pier and watch the waves break whenever I return. This is techno.